Her son asked the ICU nurse if canceling the resort would cost extra, in case Mom survives. Nora Whittaker did. She came home, changed the locks, shredded the will, and froze every account he planned to drain. By week's end, his name was erased from her trust, her deed, and her future. She'd raised him with grace. Now she was reclaiming hers. And when he came looking for answers, the silence was legally binding. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Boston, Massachusetts, 3:12 a.m., Beth Israel Deaconess ICU. The room was an orchestra of machines, quiet beeps and whirring pumps keeping a rhythm that had nothing to do with life and everything to do with the stubbornness of a failing body. Nora Whittaker, 72, lay perfectly still beneath thin hospital sheets. Her skin had lost the warmth of summer and settled into a pale, papery translucence. An oxygen mask fogged faintly with each shallow breath. The fluorescent light above buzzed once, then steadied. Outside the glass wall, Nurse Janine Bauer stared at the vitals screen. The sudden flatline an hour ago had stirred chaos. Nora had come back, barely. Code Blue had been called, resuscitation performed. But the woman lying in the bed hadn't opened her eyes since. Janine rubbed her temple and looked at the call log. Next of kin notified. The son had finally called back. She pressed speakerphone, moved to rehang IV tubing. "Mr. Whittaker, this is Nurse Bauer at Beth Israel. Your mother is stable now but critical. She coded earlier tonight." There was a beat of static, then a disembodied voice. Youngish, male, casual. "Well, damn, she actually flatlined?" Janine paused. "Yes, but she responded to resuscitation. She's unconscious, but you said she's alive?" His voice sharpened. "She's not out of danger, but yes." A sigh. Then something muffled as if he'd turned from the phone. A second voice in the background, female, laughing. Then, crystal clear. "If she makes it, we'll have to pause the vacation." Janine didn't speak. She didn't move. The room suddenly felt colder. Nora's pulse beeped steadily. Oblivious. "Anyway," the voice went on, tone flipping back to professional. "Just keep me posted, I guess. If she crashes again, I'd rather not fly back unless it's for the actual funeral. We're down in Tulum, you know. Wi-Fi's spotty." Janine stared at the speaker, her hand hovering. Then she reached into the cabinet drawer, tapped her phone's recorder and placed it close to the receiver. She said nothing. Cameron kept talking, more about timing and estate things. It droned like elevator music, emotionally empty, socially polished. She ended the call, quietly, saved the file, and deleted the record from the nurse's desk log. Not policy. But some moments didn't belong to the system. They belonged to the story of a life. Hours slipped by like tidewater. Shadows shifted across the wall. Around 6:23 a.m., Nora stirred. It wasn't dramatic. No gasp, no jolting wake-up. Just a small movement of the fingers, like someone remembering how to return to their body. Her eyelids fluttered open. Janine looked up from her chart and crossed the room quickly, pressing the call button with one hand while checking the IVs. "Welcome back, Ms. Whittaker," she said softly. Nora blinked slowly, as if processing the weight of her own name. "You're in the ICU. You coded, but you're stable now. Can you hear me?" A faint nod, barely perceptible. "You had a rough night, but you're here. You made it." Nora's lips twitched. Not a smile, more like the ghost of one. Or the beginning of a question that never made it out. Janine hesitated. This part wasn't in the script, but it had been clawing at her chest for hours. "Your son called," she said, kneeling to Nora's eye level. "He was told you were critical." A flicker in Nora's gaze. Interest, then retreat. Like a tide pulling back without warning. Janine studied her face for a moment, then chose her next words with a strange care. "He said something. Something I thought you should hear." A pause. Nora didn't blink, just listened. Janine cleared her throat. "He said, if you made it, it would interfere with their vacation." Silence. Not a twitch, not a wince. Nothing but breath and machine. But Janine saw it. A tightening behind the eyes. A click inside the soul. Not rage, not sadness. Recalibration. Later that morning, after vitals were checked and breakfast declined, Janine returned to find Nora sitting more upright, pillows adjusted with quiet precision. She wasn't speaking yet, but she was watching. Not just the room, the door, the monitors, the window. Watching like someone who'd come back with purpose. Janine placed a small notepad on the tray. "In case you want to write something." Nora didn't pick it up, but her gaze followed Janine out the door and lingered on the empty chair where no sun had come. Boston, Massachusetts. 1 week later, the taxi idled at the curb, hazard lights ticking like a metronome. Nora stepped out slowly, leaning on the cane the hospital had insisted she take. The oxygen tank wheeled behind her with the soft clack of rubber on concrete. The driver offered help. She shook her head once, politely, firmly. The porch creaked under her weight. The key turned with more resistance than she remembered. Inside, the house greeted her like a memory she hadn't earned back yet. Still, airless, muted, familiar in the way old grief was familiar, never gone, only dormant. A stack of mail slouched on the entryway table, fat with coupons, pre-approved credit offers, and one envelope that bore her son's name in his angular, tech bro handwriting. "Thought I'd catch you before discharge. Call when you're stronger. See." She placed it, unread, beside the others. The living room smelled faintly of pine cleaner. She hadn't been home in 13 days, but the air hadn't changed. The photos on the mantel hadn't either. Her late husband smiled out from a gold-rimmed frame, caught forever in a tuxedo and mid-toast. Next to him, a younger Cameron, maybe 10, clutched a fishing rod with pride that didn't quite match the tiny trout dangling from it. Nora sat down, slowly, on the brown leather couch she and Robert had bought together in 1985. Her body winced. Her spirit didn't. She reached beneath the end table for the mahogany filing box. It scraped against the floor as she pulled it out. It had been years since she'd opened it. Inside were folders: retirement, IRA, joint portfolio, Vanguard, Trust, Cameron, and a final tab labeled Final Affairs, pending signature. She opened the last one, typed pages, notarized, dated 3 years ago. All accounts, insurance, and residual assets, designated to Cameron Whitaker, sole beneficiary. The last thing she'd done before the pneumonia hit had been mailing in the power of attorney forms. It seemed almost laughable now. Her fingers found her cell phone and dialed the private number she still had saved, back when her banker took her calls personally. "Darren? Nora Whitaker? Yes, I need the full transaction history across all accounts. No, all of them. And I want access levels restructured, immediately." He paused. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's finally very clear." After she hung up, she stared at the oxygen tank in the corner, at her wrists, speckled and soft, freckled with age, at the thin imprint the hospital bracelet had left behind, still faintly red. Then she turned to the laptop. The passwords came back quicker than she expected. Old keystrokes, once automatic, now deliberate. Each login revealed numbers that made her stomach turn. Not from shock, but from clarity. There hadn't been theft, not exactly. But every financial pathway she'd paved led to Cameron. Every stone she'd laid now formed a bridge he fully expected to walk across, barefoot, champagne in hand. The cursor blinked in the top right of the screen. Change beneficiary, change password, change access. She clicked them all, then she opened a new document. Titled it, Revised Estate Draft. Her hand hovered for a moment, then began typing names. Not Cameron's, not yet. When she stood, something caught her eye, an envelope, yellowed and half stuck beneath the printer. She pulled it free. A card. Father's Day, unopened, addressed in Cameron's blocky lettering. She turned it over. No stamp. Must have been dropped off by hand. She didn't open that either. Instead, she opened the kitchen drawer, found the shredder she rarely used, plugged it in, and fed the envelope in whole. The hum of the blades cut clean through the silence. She poured herself a glass of water, steady hands betraying no tremor. The oxygen tank hissed beside her, like something breathing down her neck. She ignored it. Her phone buzzed with a confirmation from the bank. Access change complete. Your account now has single owner control. Nora read it again. Then she walked to her bedroom, opened her closet, and removed a dusty lockbox from the top shelf. Inside, her husband's handwritten will, the original copy, and the revised one she'd never signed. She placed both on the nightstand. By the window, the sun had dipped behind her neighbor's chimney, and for the first time in a long while, Nora did not feel like someone's mother. She felt like someone with unfinished business. Boston, 2 weeks post-discharge. The living room window let in a reluctant stream of morning light, cutting narrow gold strips across the coffee table. Nora's oxygen tank hissed softly beside her chair, its presence now a kind of metronome, ticking time, not preserving it. She reached for the iPad on the tray beside her tea. The hospital had insisted she engage cognitively. Cameron had once shown her how to scroll Instagram. Just in case you want to feel young again. The irony made her lips twitch. She tapped the app. There he was. Cameron Whitaker at CamWhit CEO, verified of course, sun-blasted shoulders, oversized sunglasses, a beach drink glowing coral pink with a slice of pineapple dangling like an afterthought. His girlfriend, what was her name? Bryn? Straddled a poolside hammock in something cut from the idea of clothing, captioned, "Paradise paused for passion, Tulum." No doubt. The next photo was a boomerang. Cameron, shirtless, clinking 2 glasses mid-sunset. The tagged location read, Casa del Sol Resort. She tapped it. Rooms averaged $1,400 a night. Nora set the iPad down, gently. She looked at the framed picture of Robert again. This time, it didn't offer warmth, only weight. The doorbell rang, 2 short chimes, then a pause. Millie. "Morning, sunshine," her neighbor sang, stepping in with a paper bag dangling from her wrist. "I brought croissants." "And those prune things you pretend you hate." Nora smiled, not because of the food but because Millie, unlike some people, actually showed up. "You up for a garden lap?" Millie asked, already unloading a cane from behind the door. "Doctor said movement's the ticket, didn't he?" Nora hesitated. Her bones ached in a deep, private way. But she nodded. They shuffled through the French doors and onto the stone path that wound along hydrangeas she hadn't pruned since the fall before last. The blooms sagged with June's heat, lavender melting into white. "He's not worried," Nora said finally, squinting toward the tree line. Millie glanced at her. "Who?" "My son." Millie pursed her lips. "Oh." There wasn't judgment in the silence that followed, only understanding. "He should be," Nora added. And then she smiled. Not the kind that lifts the face, the kind that sharpens it. Back inside, she eased herself into the armchair, lifted the laptop onto her knees, and opened her email. 2. martin.l.kessler@kesslerfirm.com. Subject, "Let's discuss revising everything. I'm ready. Nora." She hit send before she could second-guess it. That's when her phone rang. Unknown number. Likely the visiting nurse service again. She answered. "Ms. Whitaker, hi, this is Tasha from MedDirect. I just wanted to confirm, your recent oxygen refills went through but our billing flagged an odd travel insurance charge. Looks like it routed through your old American Express. Cancun-based. Do you happen to be traveling soon?" Nora felt her breath narrow, not from illness but something colder. Slower. "No," she said. "I'm very much still home." A beat of hesitation on the other end. "Oh, must be fraud then. We'll start a dispute file." "No need," Nora cut in. "Let the charge sit. I want to see exactly how many souvenirs he thinks I'm paying for." She ended the call without waiting for a reply. Later that evening, she printed the last 6 months of American Express statements. Line by line, she highlighted everything unaccounted for. Spa credits, resort bar tabs, something called Love and Luggage Luxury Tours. She stapled the papers into a file and labeled it Cameron, Reconciliation Pending. Then she lit a lavender candle, opened a clean notebook, and titled the first page in looping penmanship, Things I've Let Go, and shouldn't have the first line read, The Right to be Angry. Boston. 3 weeks post-discharge. The locksmith was younger than her grandson would have been, if she'd ever had one. Thin arms, worn hoodie, face still round with someone else's rules. He worked efficiently, speaking only to confirm finishes, brushed nickel or antique brass. "Nickel," Nora said. "No reason to pretend it's still the 80s. She stood on the porch as he screwed the new deadbolt into place, the old one discarded like an artifact that had overstayed its welcome. The oxygen tank hissed behind her. She barely noticed it now. It moved when she did. That was enough. Click, click. The lock caught clean. Final, satisfying. "Want me to leave the spare under the mat?" he asked. Nora's face barely shifted. "No need." She paid in cash, tipped well, watched his van pull away. By the time the afternoon light had settled in golden puddles along the floorboards, Nora had pulled 6 boxes down from the attic. Each was labeled in Robert's tidy script. Photos, Cameron, old toys, college things, keepsakes, Nora, documents, 1990 to 1998, Xmas and Misc. She sat cross-legged on the carpet, back braced against the hallway wall, and opened the first one. A foam dinosaur, green and chipped. His first swim ribbon faded from pool chlorine and attic heat. A crayon drawing. 2 stick figures under a lopsided sun, labeled "Me plus Mom equals Team." She stared at it. No smile came. Instead, she folded it once, then again, then dropped it into the discard bin. From the second box, she pulled a half-filled scrapbook, graduation photos, Cameron in robes, arms slung around his frat brothers, the edges curled with age. One Polaroid fell loose, him in a parking lot, phone to his ear, other hand mid-wave. His mouth was open like he was laughing, or lying. She tossed it aside. Midway through the third box, her old answering machine blinked, a long-dead relic she hadn't thought of in years. She fumbled for the plug, found a converter cord in Robert's desk drawer, and powered it on. The red light flashed. One saved message. She pressed play. A static burst. Then Cameron's voice. Younger, warmer, anchored in a time when promises still felt like currency. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to check in. Been thinking about you. Don't worry. I'll always take care of you, okay? No matter what." Click. The machine beeped once, like a heart monitor giving up. She didn't replay it. She didn't need to. She erased it. The bins filled slowly. Some items she kept. A brooch Robert had bought in Charleston, her wedding gloves, one of her old journals she'd never let anyone read. The rest, relics from a loyalty that hadn't been returned, she sealed for donation. By dusk, her living room was cleaner than it had been in years. She sat at the table, fingers tracing the edge of an envelope. Inside it was a key, a duplicate for Cameron. Not to the new locks, of course, to the door she'd replaced hours ago. The key would slip in, catch for a moment, and then deny. She added a note in her own cursive, "Just in case you drop by. Mom. No need to be cruel. Let reality do the talking." She sealed it, stamped it, addressed it to his condo in Cambridge. Then she made herself a cup of lemon tea, sipped it on the porch, and watched the sky shift through the branches. It had been years since she'd sat still without the weight of waiting for someone. Inside, her phone buzzed with a message. "Cameron. Thinking of swinging by next week. Finally carved out time. That okay?" She stared at it. She didn't reply. Instead, she typed a new note on her phone and saved it in her drafts. "He's coming. He doesn't know the locks have changed. Neither do I. Not fully. But I'm ready to find out who answers the door when it's only me on the other side. Boston. 4 weeks post-discharge." The call came just after 9 a.m., exactly when he knew she'd be having her tea. Nora let it ring twice before answering. "Mom?" Cameron said, voice sunny with a practiced ease. "Hey, you sound okay, stable?" Nora paused long enough to make him repeat himself. "Just wondering how you're holding up," he said again, this time slower, like he wasn't sure which mask to wear. "Been thinking about you. I mean, after everything. ICU, near death, the works. Kind of crazy you bounced back." Nora said. "Not yes, not no." "Anyway," he continued, Good thing you've got all your estate stuff locked down, right? I mean, if it happens, it happens. I'd just hate for you to leave things in a mess. If? When? Always one syllable too far forward. Of course, she replied lightly. I forget where I even put that paperwork these days. Oh, well, I think you sent me a copy a while back, just in case, he said quickly. Not that I read it. She didn't respond, just traced her finger along the rim of the porcelain mug. Her reflection in the tea looked older than she felt, and younger than she'd been treated. Cameron cleared his throat. I was going to swing by this weekend, like I said. You need anything? Nora smiled at the floor. No, sweetheart. I think I've got everything I need. When she ended the call, she left the phone face down on the table, untouched. She moved to the bookshelf where a slim accordion file sat between cookbooks she no longer used. She carried it to the kitchen counter and spread the contents like cards at a poker table. Will, power of attorney, final directives, all signed, all favoring him. Every page smelled like ink and old obligation. She fed the first one into the shredder. The blades caught with a low growl. One by one, the documents disappeared. Years of assumptions turned to confetti. Her signature in loops she'd once taken pride in, shredded with the same finality as junk mail. She let the last sheet dangle for a moment. Trust, Cameron Whitaker, sole beneficiary. Then let it fall. The machine ate it whole. 2 hours later, she stepped into the quiet hum of Larkspur Cafe, a cozy corner spot tucked behind the post office. It smelled like nutmeg and patience. A young woman behind the counter looked up. Warm eyes, tired bun, apron dusted with flour. She lit up. Hi. Oh, Ms. Whitaker, right? You sat by the window last month. You left your glasses. Nora blinked. Did I? The woman pulled them from under the counter. I kept them, just in case. Thank you, Nora said, genuinely startled. Can I get you your usual? Chamomile and the blueberry scone? Nora smiled. That sounds lovely. She took her tea to the back corner table, where a man in his late 50s waited in a pressed blazer, laptop open, pen already poised. Martin Kessler, estate attorney. Kind face, no nonsense. She didn't waste time. I want to start over, she said. Erase everything. New structure, new directives, no more blind loyalty. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. Well, we'll need to name your beneficiaries. Do you have anyone in mind? Nora looked out the window, past the soft swirl of mid-morning traffic. She did. When they finished the first round of paperwork, Martin left to scan forms. The waitress returned with the check, her apron now powdered with sugar from someone's pie crust. Nora slipped a $100 bill inside and scrawled a note on the back of the receipt. Use it for someone who shows up. She paused, then added her name and number, just in case. That night, back home, Nora opened a new file on her laptop, titled it Hannah Everson, Larkspur Cafe, age approximately 27, working, present, kind. She clicked the checkbox beside trust draft, revise beneficiaries. Next to Cameron's name, she typed in bold, remove, and in the blank that followed, Hannah Everson, 35% allocation, unrestricted, irrevocable clause, recommended. She stared at the screen. No regret, only clarity. Outside, the wind rustled the trees as if to say, she's rewriting the weather now. Boston, 5 weeks post-discharge. The morning unfolded slowly, heavy with fog, as if the world had pressed snooze. Nora moved through the kitchen with the pace of someone no longer in a rush. Kettle on, mugs warmed, oxygen tank tucked quietly in its corner like a dog that no longer barked. Her laptop pinged once. Subject, joint account, withdrawal attempt blocked. She clicked it open. The Vanguard interface blinked with soft blue urgency. Someone, not her, had tried to remove $18,400 from their joint investment fund. Flagged. Frozen. Suspicious activity. She reached for her tea without flinching. Her phone rang seconds later. Cameron. Mobile decline. Again. Voicemail. No message. Another call. Then a flurry of texts. Cameron. Did you lock the account? Cameron. I can't access the portfolio. What's going on? Cameron. You could have told me if you were changing stuff. Jesus, Mom. Cameron. This looks like elder fraud. I'm calling the bank. She didn't reply. Instead, she opened her calendar and added an all-caps event at 10 a.m. Ignore him. At 10:03, the doorbell rang. But it wasn't him. It was Hannah. Hi, sorry to drop in, she said, lifting a brown paper bag like an offering. I brought the good kind, blueberry with lemon glaze, still warm. Nora stepped back. You always show up when it matters. I've got a weird sixth sense about tea and trouble. Hannah grinned, stepping inside. Also, my shift got cancelled, and I thought, maybe you wouldn't mind company. They sat by the window, legs tucked beneath them, steam rising from chipped mugs. So, Hannah said, licking glaze from her thumb, that lawyer guy, he helping you with the estate stuff? Nora nodded. New beginning. Hannah looked down. That's brave. Most people your age— sorry, that sounded bad. I mean, most people wouldn't— restart. Nora studied her for a long moment. Have you ever let someone take something from you because it was easier than reclaiming it? Hannah didn't answer right away. Yeah, she said quietly. My mom. Years of it. Then one day I stopped letting her come back. Nora reached across the table and opened the small wooden jewelry box that had sat untouched for months. From it, she drew a thin silver bracelet, delicate, with a turquoise bead in the center. It was mine, she said, placing it in Hannah's palm. Now it's yours. Hannah blinked. Are you sure? Things should belong to people who know how to hold them, Nora replied. They sat in silence, the kind that makes space rather than fills it. Then came the pounding, not a knock, pounding, like fists trying to wake a sleeping house or shatter one. Hannah startled. Nora didn't move, another slam. Then Cameron's voice, muffled but rising. Mom, are you home? I know you're here. Hannah looked at her, wide-eyed. Should I? No, Nora said simply. Let him knock. Outside, Cameron's voice turned sharper. You've frozen the joint account. Do you even know what that means? You're being manipulated. Who's advising you? He tried the doorknob. Click. Nothing. He stepped back, huffed. This is elder abuse. I'll go to the court if I have to. Hannah stood. Should I call someone? No, Nora said again, her tone iron. He wants a reaction, not a resolution. The pounding stopped. Then footsteps, fast, angry, descending the porch stairs. Hannah turned to her. That was him? Yes, Nora said. She exhaled, a long one, then added with calm finality, and that's the last time he tries to take something from me without knocking on more than a door. Boston, 6 weeks post-discharge. It was the kind of coffee shop designed for appearances, reclaimed wood, Edison bulbs, music soft enough to imply taste, but loud enough to mask lies. Nora had chosen it deliberately, public, neutral, no memories rooted there. She arrived 5 minutes early, wrapped in a pale cashmere coat she hadn't worn in years. It smelled faintly of cedar and forgotten winters. She tucked her oxygen line beneath the scarf, leaving only the canister at her feet to whisper that anything was fragile. Cameron walked in exactly 7 minutes late, no apology, no eye contact as he scanned for her. When he spotted her, he smiled. Too big, too bright. Hey, Mom, he said, pulling out the chair across from her. You look good, considering. Nora folded her hands in her lap. I'm here. That's enough. He leaned back, latte in hand, as if they were catching up after a mild disagreement instead of years of manipulation wrapped in sun-shaped charm. I've been worried, he said. Your texts, or lack of, the bank stuff, the frozen accounts. I mean, come on, that's not like you. She said nothing. Let the silence breathe. I get it, he continued, tapping the lid of his drink. Hospitals are hard. People get confused. Sometimes the trauma can linger. Make us paranoid, right? She blinked. You've always been sharp, he added quickly. But trauma messes with decision-making. Honestly, it's why courts appoint guardians sometimes. Just to help. She reached into her bag and removed a slim black folder. I brought something, she said, sliding it across the table. He opened it, casually at first, then slower. Pages, bank statements, authorization revocations, new power of attorney forms, her name, her initials, not his. A document labeled Irrevocable Trust, designation of Hannah Everson, primary beneficiary. And below that, Form 56, removal of heir, discretionary clause. Cameron's smile cracked, then splintered. What is this? Her tone was low, even. A receipt for all the things I should have said years ago. You're not thinking straight. I'm thinking for the first time in a very long while. You've been manipulated. She held up a hand. He stopped. You were only fragile, she said, when I had something to give. His jaw clenched. This is insane. You're not even naming me? After everything I've done, exactly. You're punishing me for not flying across the globe when you were in a hospital bed. I'm correcting a mistake. He stood abruptly, the chair skidding slightly. People looked. One man glanced up over his newspaper. Cameron leaned forward, voice low but sharp. You think giving it to some waitress makes you noble? She won't take care of you. She'll take the check and disappear. She already showed up without knowing a check existed. Cameron shook his head. This isn't over. No, she said, but your part is. He scoffed, snatched the folder, then thought better of it and shoved it back across the table. Unbelievable, he muttered, walking out, fast, unmoored. Nora didn't watch him leave. She reached for her tea. Still warm, still hers. A barista passed by and smiled. Everything all right? Yes, Nora said quietly. Everything's just beginning. She stood slowly, slipping the folder back into her bag. Outside, the city moved like it always had, impatient, indifferent, alive. She stepped into it, and behind her, the coffee shop door swung shut with a sound that felt, somehow, exactly like closure. Boston, 7 weeks post-discharge. The sign went up on a Wednesday. Simple, white, unobtrusive. For sale, by appointment only. The kind of placard people drove by without reading, unless they were looking for it. Cameron had been looking. Nora watched from the upstairs window as his sleek gray Audi rolled past the curb. He slowed, craned his neck, tapped something into his phone. Then the car sped off, clean, controlled, furious. The text came seconds later. Cameron. What the hell is this? Are you selling the house? Cameron. You don't even tell me? This is my inheritance, Mom. Cameron. You're clearly not well. We're going to have a real talk. She blocked the number. The silence that followed was instantaneous and soothing. By noon, the realtor had arrived. A younger woman with a practical bob and a clipboard full of phrases like staging potential and strong seller's market. Nora showed her around, pointing to each creaky stair and drafty vent like she was giving a tour of a life she was no longer invested in. This is the den, she said. Robert built the bookcases himself, badly, but with love. The realtor smiled politely. We can list as is or clean up some of the details. Depends on what kind of emotional tone you want to convey. No emotion, Nora replied. Just the truth. It's a good house, but it doesn't belong to me anymore. She didn't say who it never truly belonged to. Later that afternoon, she carried 3 boxes of books to her car and drove them to the public library. The librarian offered to scan each one. Nora waved her off. They've done enough. Let them go. By evening, the furniture was halfway spoken for. Millie took the writing desk. The couple next door claimed the antique armchair. The dining table, where holidays had been reduced to awkward silences and cell phones, was left at the curb with a note that read, "Free, heavy with memories." The front door creaked. Open. Hannah entered carefully, holding a bucket of vinegar cleaner and a bundle of fresh dish towels. Didn't want to miss the action. Nora gestured to the living room. Plenty left to lift if you're feeling ambitious. They worked in a rhythm. Soft scrapes, shared laughter, unspoken healing. I always thought I'd grow old in this house, Nora said quietly, folding a curtain she no longer liked. But then I realized I already did. What comes next doesn't need these walls. Hannah glanced up. Where will you go? Somewhere with less echo. They were wiping down the baseboards when the doorbell rang. Nora tensed, just slightly. But it was only the realtor again, back with a camera and a checklist. As she photographed each room, Nora reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out a small brass key, its edges dulled by time. She pressed it into Hannah's hand. "Just in case I'm not the one who gets the last walkthrough." Hannah blinked. "You sure?" "I'm sure." She didn't say what the key really meant: trust, legacy, protection from a storm she suspected was still circling. The storm came 2 days later, in the form of a legal notice. In the matter of Nora Whittaker, petition for protective guardianship due to medical incapacity filed by Cameron Whittaker attached exhibit. A. ICU record, Beth Israel, Deaconess, Flatline Code. Blue claim, subject may lack mental clarity to manage assets or make significant estate changes without oversight. Nora read it once, then again. The paper shook, but only slightly. She walked to the filing cabinet, pulled out her signed evaluations, her updated medical clearance, her lawyer's contact sheet. Then she folded the petition in half and placed it inside a folder labeled Pending, Threats in Costume. The doorbell rang again. She didn't flinch. Suffolk County Probate Court, Boston, 8 weeks post-discharge. The courtroom smelled like varnish and tired arguments. Nora walked in without help. No cane, no oxygen tank, just a sharply tailored navy coat, a simple clutch, and a slow, deliberate gait that made the few people watching sit a little straighter. Cameron was already seated with his lawyer, a man who looked exactly how you'd imagine someone billing by the hour to discredit an elderly woman. Crisp cuffs, silver tie clip, zero warmth. Cameron didn't look up when she passed. He was too busy whispering something urgent into the man's ear, gesturing toward her like she was a piece of evidence with legs. Nora took her place at the respondent's table. Her own attorney, Martin Kessler, nodded once. Not in reassurance, but solidarity. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the kind of bone-tired eyes that had seen too many family betrayals dressed as concern, scanned the file. "We're here today to address petition number 23-447-B, Mr. Cameron Whittaker's request for protective guardianship over his mother, Ms. Nora Whittaker, on the basis of medical and cognitive incapacity," she said dryly. "Let's proceed." Cameron's attorney rose. "Your Honor, the petitioner has grave concerns regarding Ms. Whittaker's mental and medical clarity, stemming from a recent ICU incident involving a cardiac event and oxygen failure. Following that episode, she has made a series of irrational financial decisions, including dissolving long-established estate plans, transferring assets to unrelated parties, and liquidating primary residence property. My client believes these actions reflect a diminished ability to reason." "Your Honor," Martin interjected calmly, "we have medical records, evaluations from 2 separate licensed geriatricians, and a sworn statement from her attending physician at Beth Israel, stating the opposite." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear from the physician." A tall man with wire-rimmed glasses stepped forward. Dr. Ira Mendel, Nora's primary for nearly 7 years, held a file in one hand and an amused expression on his face. "I examined Ms. Whittaker personally last week, Your Honor," he began. "Her vitals are stable, her cognition sharp. And frankly, if we're testing for sound decision-making, she's more lucid than I am after 2 cups of coffee." A chuckle rippled through the courtroom. Nora didn't smile. She didn't need to. "Anything further?" the judge asked, glancing at Cameron's table. His lawyer stood, adjusted his papers, and then, after a long pause, simply shook his head. The judge looked at Nora. "Ms. Whittaker, would you like to make a statement?" She rose slowly, deliberately. "I've survived pneumonia, cardiac arrest, and raising a child who believes inheritance is an entitlement," she said clearly, her voice a level thread of steel. "That's not confusion. That's clarity earned." She sat back down without another word. The silence that followed was deep and unnerving. The judge exhaled. "Petition denied, permanently. I see no grounds to question Ms. Whittaker's capacity. In fact, I commend her for showing more grace under fire than most of the parties who've stood before me this month." She tapped her gavel once. "Oh, and Mr. Whittaker," she added without looking up, "for wasting court resources on what was clearly a retaliatory filing, I'm issuing a $2,500 fine, payable within 30 days. Cameron flinched. Nora stood and walked out. She didn't glance back. Not when her son slammed his pen down, not when the bailiff whispered something to Martin, not when the hall outside hummed with echoes of other broken families waiting for their turn. She stepped into the corridor like it was sunlight. And there, on the bench by the vending machine, was Hannah, holding 2 coffees, one with a pink sticky note that read, "Victory tastes like cream and no sugar." Nora accepted the cup. "Anything happen?" Hannah asked playfully. "Nothing I didn't see coming," Nora said. They started walking toward the exit. As they passed the security checkpoint, Nora looked straight ahead. And behind her, somewhere in that building, Cameron watched a door close that wasn't his to open anymore. Boston, 9 weeks post-discharge. The first episode was just a whisper into the mic. Nora sat cross-legged on the floor of her almost empty living room, the kind of space that made every word echo back a little too loudly. A moving box sat behind her, unopened. The oxygen tank was in the hall, unused. On the coffee table, a microphone clipped to a borrowed laptop, a notepad filled with crooked arrows, and a sticky note that simply read, "Start with what hurt, then tell why you healed." Hannah sat on the arm of the couch, earbuds in, monitoring levels. Nora inhaled, slowly, then pressed the button. "My name is Nora Whittaker," she said, voice steady. "I was born in 1952. I've loved one man, raised one son, buried one body, and recovered from one flatline. This is not a story about endings. This is a story about what I should have said sooner." Click. That was chapter 1. By the end of the week, there were 5 chapters. Each was just under 10 minutes. Tight, deliberate, unapologetic. Titles like The Cost of Silence, Love with Strings, Don't Wait for the Apology, and The Key is You. She talked about her husband, the kindness, the quiet warnings she missed. About Cameron, the love that had curdled, the red flags that looked like parental duty. About being 72 and waking up in a hospital to find no one at her bedside except a nurse who told the truth and an account statement that didn't lie. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for sympathy. She just told it. Hannah helped upload the episodes to a platform she knew from her phone. Silverline Stories, a tiny podcast hub mostly used by retirees who still typed with 2 fingers. They listed it under wellness greater than aging, greater than first person, and gave it a simple name, The Nora Record. By the 3rd night, the inbox pinged, then again, and again. Subject, "You said what I couldn't." Subject, "I left my daughter a voicemail today, first one in 6 years." Subject, "Your voice is what mine wants to become." Nora read them all. She didn't reply at first, until one message came in, written in uneven lines from a woman in Minnesota. "I was going to take the pills this week, then I heard you say, 'You have permission to outgrow people who raised you.' I cried for 6 hours, then I threw them out. You saved my life. Angie, 68th. Nora read that one twice. Then she printed it, folded it, slipped it into the same envelope where her original will used to live. By the following Monday, the podcast was trending in retirement forums. Not viral like celebrity gossip, viral like wildfire in a dry forest. Quiet, fast, unstoppable. An admin from Women Over 60 Speak emailed and asked if she'd do a guest spot. A local NPR affiliate reached out. "Just a brief segment," the producer wrote. "Your voice? It cuts through." Hannah made a tiny graphic using Canva. Nora in profile, half lit, with the words, "You don't have to be angry to walk away, just done." The quote took off. By the end of the week, Nora had an audience she'd never asked for, but had apparently always been speaking to. She recorded chapter 6 from the back porch, wind chimes clinking behind her. "This one's about legacy," she said, "and about what happens when you decide it's yours to define, even if it starts late, even if no one claps." Click. Hannah brought out 2 mugs of tea. "We've got a message from someone in Vermont who said they named their cat after you." Nora laughed, actually laughed, and felt it deep in her ribs. "They'll be disappointed when the cat ignores them," she said. "As it should." They sat in the sun, the world strangely warm. Then Hannah's phone buzzed. She checked it, eyes narrowed. "Your son posted something," she said, handing it over. Cameron's Instagram, private now, showed a blank photo with a caption that simply read, "Be careful who you teach to speak. Sometimes they remember everything." Nora looked at it, paused, then handed the phone back. "I hope he listens," she said. He always hated silence. Boston, 10 weeks post-discharge. The voicemail came at 1:14 a.m. Nora didn't hear it until morning. By then, the sun was already leaning through the curtains, soft and indifferent. She made her tea before checking the phone. No urgency, not anymore. She played the message once, didn't bother turning the volume up. Cameron's voice was unmistakable, tight, rehearsed sarcasm barely masked by late-night bravado. "Nice little fame bubble you've got going, Mom. Podcasts, quotes, tea parties with strangers who think you're Maya Angelou with a retirement account. You finally got a stage. Must feel great. Rewriting history while the real story gets buried. Hope you're proud. I mean, whatever helps you sleep, right?" There was a pause, then quieter. "It's good content. I'll give you that." Click. No follow-up. No text. No apology. Just digital dust from someone who thought a microphone made her delusional, not dangerous. Nora didn't save the message. She didn't replay it. She didn't even feel angry. Instead, she scrolled through her contacts and tapped Edit at the top. She deleted Cameron Whitaker, then tapped Block Contact and let the phone drop face down onto the kitchen counter. That afternoon, the garden bloomed in soft color. Lavender by the fence, clematis trailing the archway. The table was set for 12, shaded by a canvas umbrella. Simple china, lemon scones, chicken salad in glass bowls. Hannah had tied napkins with twine, tucked sprigs of rosemary in each one. "Looks like a wedding, but without the bad music," she said, stepping back to admire her work. The guests arrived slowly. 4 women from the neighborhood book club, a retired Latin teacher with a sharp laugh, and 2 brothers who ran the corner flower shop. Nora welcomed each with the ease of someone who had once believed solitude was the only safe company. At the center of the table, a clipboard sat beneath a bowl of peaches. On it, Whitaker Fund, initial charter discussion, youth support, housing, vocational training. Nora tapped the top of the page. "We're not solving everything," she said, "but maybe we solve one thing, for someone. Maybe that's enough." There was quiet nodding, thoughtful forks against plates. Hope held with both hands. "I can start the seed money," Nora said. "How much?" one woman asked gently. Nora smiled. "Enough to mean something. Not enough to miss." Hannah leaned in. "We could set it up as a public trust. Real structure, public records. Transparent, untouchable." "Untouchable," Nora repeated. The word lingered. She looked toward the street. Unseen from the table just beyond the hedges, a silver Audi idled. Parked half a block down, lights off, engine humming like a question. Nora didn't move, didn't flinch. Cameron never got out. He watched behind tinted glass as his mother laughed, really laughed, at something the Latin teacher said. Watched as strangers passed around a sign-up sheet, toasted lemonade in stemless glasses, clinked spoons like ceremony. By the time the guests stood to leave, the car was gone. Inside the house, Nora sat at her desk, a legal form open on her screen. Whitaker Resilience Trust grant status, public revocability, locked, permanent clause, activated beneficiaries, youth support agencies, Boston, Lowell, Dorchester, trustee Hannah Everson. She scrolled to the bottom and clicked, Submit a confirmation pinged, trust activated, filing ID 1480226-B/State of Massachusetts Public Record. Nora sat back, breath calm, not triumphant, not vindicated, just anchored. Outside, dusk brushed the yard with watercolor hues. Hannah stood by the porch, sipping a second lemonade. "Do you think he knows?" she asked quietly. Nora didn't turn from the screen. "He'll find out. But by then it'll be too late to undo any of it." A breeze stirred the rosemary napkins, still resting in a basket. And from deep in Nora's chest came a quiet exhale, the kind you don't realize you've been holding until it's over. Boston. 11 weeks post-discharge. The article appeared on page 4 of the Boston Globe's Sunday edition. Headline, "A Voice That Didn't Flinch. One Widow's Late Life Podcast Redefines Strength." The profile was simple, thoughtful, no sensationalism, no pity. Just Nora, photographed at her desk beside a half-drunk mug of tea, eyes focused forward. It covered the basics: her near-death experience, the viral episodes, the launch of the Whitaker Resilience Trust. It quoted a few lines from The Cost of Silence and mentioned her growing following, mostly women over 60, though the writer noted a surprising number of listeners under 30 who called her voice surgical. Nora read it once, then folded the paper and placed it beside the stove. She didn't need to clip it. She was already living it. Later that week, she sat on stage at a small civic auditorium for a local panel called Aging with Dignity, Power in the Later Chapters. 5 metal chairs, 3 microphones, a bowl of peppermints on a folding table. Beside her, a former judge, a retired school principal, and a woman named Barbara who'd left her family farm at 65 to become a doula for dying patients. Each shared quietly, without drama. When it was Nora's turn, she kept it short. "I used to think being quiet made me gracious, that enduring hurt without complaint made me strong," she said, "but I've learned that dignity isn't silent, it's just selective." A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. After the panel, attendees clustered around the refreshments, awkwardly generous slices of cake and overbrewed coffee. A man in a veteran's cap hugged Nora without asking. A younger woman thanked her for saying the things I didn't know I was allowed to feel. But it was the group of older women in the corner, quiet, cautious, who moved her most. They shared stories in fragments. "My son hasn't called in 4 years. My daughter only visits when her husband travels. I had a stroke. They argued over the house before I could speak again." Nora listened, and then said, "You are not the sum of how someone else failed to love you." They didn't cry. They nodded. It was enough. That night, Nora recorded a bonus episode. She didn't plan it. She just sat in her robe, candle lit, and pressed record. "This one's called Boundaries Aren't Cruel," she said. She spoke about the difference between bitterness and self-respect, about how women are taught to be legacy keepers even when the legacy hurts, about how removing someone from your will doesn't mean you stopped loving them. It means you stopped giving them permission to hurt you with it. The audio crackled slightly in the background, a light rain beginning on the porch roof. At the end, she paused, then added, "You're allowed to say no, even if it's decades late, especially then." Click. Hannah would upload it in the morning. The message came just before midnight, not from Cameron, from his wife, Lila. A name Nora had rarely heard spoken aloud, a woman she'd only met 3 or 4 times, always with manicured hands and eyes that watched more than they spoke. "Hi, Nora. I know things have been complicated. I don't want to intrude, but if you're willing, I'd like to meet, just once, for some closure. It doesn't have to be about him, but it would mean something to me." Nora stared at the screen. She didn't feel anger or curiosity, only clarity. She opened a blank message, typed slowly, "He already chose." Then she hit send, and turned her phone face down. Outside, the wind had picked up. Not a storm, just enough to move the leaves and remind the trees that fall was coming. Nora stood by the window sipping tea gone cold, watching the shadows dance across the yard like people gathering and leaving, again and again. She felt no need to chase them, not anymore. Boston, late September. The decline didn't look dramatic from the outside. There were no headlines, no foreclosures, no arrests, just the slow, methodical peeling away of cushions he never thought he'd have to sit without. First, the brokerage firm froze his discretionary margin. Without Nora's accounts propping his credit, the line vanished like a mirage. Then the corporate card flagged him for a bounce dinner in the seaport, surf and turf for 2 that ended with a declined swipe and a stilted apology. Lila left the following week. He came home to an open closet and a half-empty drawer. A note, carefully folded, left in place of her hairdryer. "I married someone. I don't know who you became. Please don't contact me." He tried anyway. Once, It bounced. The watch was next. His Tag Heuer, a graduation gift from Nora inscribed on the back. For every second you make count, pawned for a fraction of its worth. The cashier never flipped it over. Nora knew none of this in real time. She didn't check. She didn't ask. She only knew what came through in the inbox, and that came steadily, like a dripping faucet no one had the nerve to fix. Subject, I'm sorry. Subject, just a conversation? Subject, it didn't have to be this way. Subject, I know I messed up. Can we talk? The messages grew longer, rambled, apologized without specifics, defended while surrendering. He told stories she didn't recognize, about how much pressure he'd been under, how money blurred things, how he never meant for it to go that far. He never once asked how she was doing now. She archived each one without opening it, not deleted, not responded to, just removed from her sight, like a draft of a version of herself that no longer needed editing. The letter took her 10 minutes to write. That morning she brewed her tea slowly, picked the stationery with a faint gold edge, folded it once, slid it into an envelope that matched nothing else in the drawer. No return address, no signature, just a single printed quote centered on a blank page, bolded, underlined in soft graphite. You paused your love. I pressed stop. She sealed it, stamped it, walked it to the corner mailbox herself, dropped it in with a finality so quiet it didn't echo. It absorbed. In Cambridge, Cameron retrieved the envelope 3 days later. He recognized the handwriting on the front. For a moment, something flickered in him. Hope, maybe, or dread. The two wore the same shoes when they arrived late. He opened it in the kitchen, alone. When he pulled the page free and read the quote, he waited for more, turned the paper over, checked the envelope again. Nothing. Just that one sentence. He read it again. And again. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead. A leak tapped somewhere behind the dishwasher. The sound of something forgotten, but no longer forgiven. Back in Boston, Nora was already on Chapter 9. She recorded it in her new apartment, smaller, quieter, filled only with what she'd chosen to carry forward. No echoes, no heirlooms with obligations. She titled the episode, Closure is a Choice. And as she clicked the red circle to begin, she didn't think of Cameron. She thought of her own voice, returning to her. One sentence at a time. Click. Boston, late October. It started in the soles of her feet. A slowness, not sharp, not even painful, just a weight, a suggestion from her body that the clock was changing tone. By the end of the week, the stairs in her new apartment felt longer, her mug heavier, her breaths not shorter, just fewer. She didn't tell anyone. Not because she was afraid, because she wasn't. Nora lit the candle she saved for Sundays. Sandalwood and vanilla, the kind Robert used to say made the house smell like a rich person's waiting room. She smiled faintly at the memory, then moved the microphone closer. On the coffee table sat her notepad, fewer scribbles this time. Only one phrase, written in pen so dark it nearly bled through the page. This one is for the letting go. She pressed the record button. My name is Nora Whittaker, she began, voice thinner than usual, but still firm. If you've been listening, you already know that part. You know the pieces, the chapters, the costs, and if you've stayed this long, I think you know the ending isn't really what matters. She paused. The microphone picked up a soft wheeze in her chest. She didn't edit it out. I always wanted a final vacation, somewhere quiet, with tea and books and no schedule. Maybe I thought I had to earn it, or maybe I thought someone would plan it for me. A short cough, contained. I realize now I've been taking it. Right here, one episode at a time. Every story I told, every word I reclaimed, was a mile farther from the person I used to be quiet for. Her voice cracked. Not from emotion, but where. Still, she went on. I want to thank the strangers who stopped feeling like strangers, the ones who wrote, who listened, who forgave themselves in real time with me. A longer pause, then gently, and to anyone still waiting for permission to heal, you already have it. You had it before I said anything. My voice didn't give it to you. It just reminded you what yours sounds like. She sat back for a moment, lips parted as if something else might rise. But no. Instead, she leaned in once more and said, "This is Nora Whittaker. Signing off." Click. Hannah found her on the couch an hour later, wrapped in a quilt, eyes closed, breathing, still, but slow. "I think we're done," Nora whispered, one hand resting near the mic. "Not yet," Hannah said gently. She carried the laptop into the next room, uploaded the file, trimmed nothing, titled it exactly as Nora had written on the sticky note beside her cup. Episode 10, The Last Vacation I Never Paid For. She didn't preview it, just clicked publish, then leaned her forehead against the edge of the screen and let the tears come. Silent, full. The comments poured in before the hour was out. "You changed my life. I'm 71. I thought I'd missed my chance to start over. I was wrong. Goodbye, Nora. I never met you, but I love you. I'm going to call my mom today. Not for her. For me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Some were short, some read like confessionals. None of them felt performative. They were raw, real, like she'd made the world brave enough to whisper back. Nora stirred once that night, as wind rattled the windows. Not in pain, just drifting between states. In the morning, she would ask Hannah for chamomile and her favorite scone, but tonight, she slept like someone who finally knew. She didn't need applause to have been heard, just a clear signal, a steady microphone, and the final word on her own ending. Boston, early November. She passed just before dawn, no drama, no alarms, just a soft exhale beneath a wool blanket, as if she'd finally finished the sentence she'd been writing her whole life. Hannah found her an hour later, curled slightly toward the window, her fingers still resting near the edge of a closed journal. The tea from the night before sat untouched, still warm, still hers. 3 days later, the auditorium buzzed with low voices and layered grief, not the kind that collapses, the kind that holds, that steadies, that remembers. The tribute wasn't religious. Nora had once joked, "If I'm going somewhere, I hope it has better lighting." So they gave her string lights across the rafters, a looping slideshow of old Polaroids and podcast graphics, and a stage draped in navy velvet. The banner read, "The Voice That Stayed," a tribute to Nora Whittaker. Hannah spoke first, her hands shaking only once. She didn't want applause, she said, but she deserved it, and she got it from people she never met who felt known anyway. There were songs, letters, a recording of Nora reading from her unfinished memoir, words clear, unhurried. "I didn't reclaim everything, but I reclaimed enough to leave a mark that wasn't a bruise." The audience stood when it ended, not because someone told them to, because some silences earn it. In her will, Nora left behind no debt, no outstanding disputes, no place for argument. The Whittaker Resilience Trust transferred seamlessly to Hannah, along with the files, the archive passwords, and one soft envelope labeled "Open after the last light fades." Inside it, the deed to Nora's home, notarized, unambiguous, and a note, "This house saw too many things I didn't stop in time. Let it now be yours, a place where healing isn't hosted. It lives." Hannah cried until the paper blurred. Cameron filed the appeal 2 weeks later. He cited new evidence, podcast audio taken out of context, his mother's unsteady tone in her final episode, vague allegations that she was manipulated by younger actors in proximity. The court denied it before the ink dried. Appeal rejected, no standing. Prior orders upheld. A final footnote from the clerk. Further filings of this nature may result in sanctions. Cameron never showed up to the memorial. He never called Hannah. He never wrote again. On a cold Thursday morning, Hannah stood before the front steps of the home she used to visit as a guest. She held the key Nora had once placed in her hand, just in case, and now, the deed that said she no longer needed permission. She opened the door. The house smelled of rosemary and thyme. She moved room by room, not to change things, but to learn them. She kept the old kettle, repainted the walls, turned Nora's recording nook into a small library where women could come and record their own stories. They called it the porch light room, Because it stayed on, even when no one knocked. A year later, a new edition of the Nora Record launched, a compilation series featuring stories from other women who'd found strength in her voice. Each episode began with the same introduction. She spoke, so we didn't have to stay quiet. And each ended with Nora's final quote, recorded in the margins of her unpublished memoir. In the end, I paid the bill and left the table. On what would have been her 73rd birthday, Hannah received a notice in the mail. Account summary: Nora Whittaker. Status: finalized. Checking: closed. Vanguard: settled. Trusts: active under new trustee. Liabilities: none. Notes: all balances resolved. No further action required. She framed the page, not because it mattered financially, because it was proof that a woman could clean her life like a ledger, could balance it, could leave without owing anything, not even explanation. Outside, the porch light clicked on at dusk. Inside, someone else pressed record. And somewhere, in another city, in another life, a listener hit play. Not to mourn her, to continue her, to speak at last, and to walk away without needing to look back.